Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to continue talking about the new Atlas Ascendancy trees, and where in the first video in this series I talked about the northwest quadrant of the Atlas. I'm going to be talking about the northeast quadrant today. So that's Lex Proxima and Lex Ejoris. If you ever get those two mixed up, Proxima is the one that's in close proximity to the center. So, these are the two northeast sections of the Atlas. One of them has a focus on Breach, Delve, Harvest, and has a couple of other things as well. And the other one, Lex Ejoris, has a Delirium focus with some other things included too. So let's start with Lex Proxima. Lex Proxima has a bunch of interesting nodes related to Breach. It has a very strong seeming invading force. This causes breaches to be larger, to have more monster density, and to grant more XP. I think that you're pretty much always going to take this node, unless you have a razor focus on some other type of content, because it's just so good. It's going to add a lot of monsters to a zone, and even if you're just going off the breaches that occur naturally in a map, you will get them enough that invading force will feel good. But there's plenty of ways that you can stack breaches on maps as well. Breach scarabs, sextants, things like that. And so with all that in mind, this is looking pretty solid invading force. That said, I'm less impressed with Gatekeepers and Within Their Grasp. So Gatekeepers and Within Their Grasp both focus on increasing the number of beyond bosses that spawn. Breach bosses that spawn. Now, breach bosses will sometimes, it's quite rare, they will spawn inside a breach, and when you kill them, they will drop 10 breach splinters. You kill them, you don't actually defeat them properly, they retreat when they fall to 0 health, and then you can go and fight them in their breach stone, and that's how you actually kill them. They won't drop any of their special loot, the loot that's on their breach stone loot tables, but they will drop 10 splinters by default. So with Gatekeepers, you got double the chance to get one, and when you do defeat one, you're going to get 20 splinters instead of 10. If you don't succeed in defeating them, but you do drop their hit points down meaningfully, you will get one breach splinter per 5% of their health that you knock down. Normally it's 1 per 10%. However, when you drive them off completely, you've got a 5% chance for them to drop a full breach stone. Full breach stone drops are a lot better than 100 splinters because it's one click, not 100. And so that's going to be one of the reasons that people will like the Gatekeepers mod. You're just going to occasionally get a full breach stone in maps. Within Their Grasp takes this full breach stone thing a bit further. So instead of a 5% chance to get a full breach stone, it's 10%. And there's a chance for it to be upgraded to a charged, enriched, or pure breach stone. Fair warning, when a Chayula drops a breach stone, it's generally speaking better for that to be a normal breach stone than for it to be charged or enriched. That's definitely the case in trade leagues, because you cannot use It That Fled in Research in the Betrayal system to upgrade an already charged or enriched breach stone into a pure one. For those that aren't familiar with the charged, enriched, and pure breach stones, they have higher monster level, higher monster density, but most importantly higher XP than the normal version of the breach stone, but they are considerably harder as well. So, that is the breach section out of the way. Let's talk about Harvest. Now, Harvest is interesting in that it's sort of split. You got some of it north and some of it south. But what do we have here? We have Bountiful Harvest, which is focused on increasing the XP that you get from Harvest. I don't think that this is going to be particularly meaningful. However, there's an open question on whether this second line, harvested plants in areas, have a 50% chance to spawn an additional monster. It's an open question whether that is going to cause you to get more crafts out of your harvest. Harvest, as I mentioned in the first video in this series, was in its original form in 3.11. It was such a brokenly powerful crafting system that essentially it rendered all other crafting systems in the game almost irrelevant. We don't know whether Harvest is going to return it at anything close to that level of power or not. If it does, then every player, without fail, has to take all of the Harvest-related nodes. It's just wrong not to take them because they're going to be so powerful. They're going to be so much more powerful than any other option that it's just objectively wrong not to take them. On the flip side, if it's not as powerful as it was, then it's going to be a bit harder to work out what the correct decision is. So ultimately, with Harvest, it's hard to say yet. But that said, Bountiful Harvest is at the weaker end of Harvest nodes. Bumper Crop is potentially at the stronger end, and that's because the Sacred Grove in areas contains an additional harvest. I believe this means that you'll get 3 batches of crafts instead of 2, which is a big increase. Harvest areas have double bonuses to item quantity and rarity is niche. There are some niche farming strategies that focus upon getting as big as possible an increase to item rarity on harvest, and then using that to farm a whole bunch of unique items. I'm not sure that that's going to be viable in 3.13. It was very, very, very dominant in 3.11, so we'll have to find out how that works out. Heart of the Grove is an interesting one. This makes it more likely for you to encounter the end boss of the Harvest content. That said, we don't know what her rewards are going to be, so we're just going to have to find that out. Harvesting areas have a 10% chance for the unchosen crop to not wilt. My understanding of this is that it's slightly worse than a 10% more multiplier to the amount of harvest crafts you get. Whilst it's not as powerful as Bumper Crop, if it turns out that harvest crafting is anywhere near as good as it was in 3.11, then there's no decision to be made here. There is just, you take these 4 points no matter what, because if Harvest is as powerful as it used to be, it's the only valid option for crafting items. Next up we have Seance, which is an oddball. Torment has not been a well-received mechanic, but when monsters are already possessed, Torment actually works really well. This is going to be a powerhouse in causing like massive loot explosions across the whole map. I have a feeling that Seance may actually be one of the most powerful of all of the 2-point nodes on the whole in the whole new system that's been added, but I do need to play with it to be certain of that. And the reason for that is that rare monsters that are possessed just drop so many items, and they drop so many unique items, so many rare items, that in conjunction with scarabs, especially reliquary scarabs, you will again be able to you'll be able to mass farm unique items. The first few players that do that are going to make mirrors and mirrors and mirrors at the start of the league. Getting Impulses, Broken Hearts, and things like that, selling them while they're still worth a lot. But even after that falls off, Seance could still potentially be quite good in conjunction with reliquary scarabs and chasing some of the really rare unique items that require the Zana modifiers to get them. A big factor in how good Seance will be is whether Nemesis is available on the Zana's map device, because there is incredible synergy between Seance and Nemesis. Firstly, the monsters that you are amping up their item rarity and their item quantity, they're going to be able to drop Headhunter, as well as have more quantity and more rarity. Lastly, the minions being touched is a moderate factor in items as well. Fair warning though, Seance is going to be dangerous. Some of the ghosts are very dangerous when they're possessing a monster, and so there will be a lot of hardcore rips that are caused by Seance. Okay, so now we have the Delve Specialist section, and essentially my advice here is, if you're a player that is intending to have a razor focus on Delve, you should take all 6 of these nodes. If you are a player who is intending to delve casually, you should take Rich Veins and Sulfite Infusion. If you're not interested in Delve, then give this section entirely a miss. Essentially, all of these are various forms of Sulfite multipliers, with the exception of Pact with Energy. Pact with Energy is something that will make it, and this is why I only recommend this to people who are doing serious Delve farming. Pact with Energy will give you a lot of move speed while you're running through maps in order to get yourself more Sulfite. That is useful in the context of a character that is a Delve Specialist, because it minimises the time you spend mapping, allowing you to spend more time in the Delve mines. But don't do this if you're just delving casually. Only take Pact with Energy if you have a razor focus on Delve, you're trying to get to 1500 depth or deeper. Okay, so then we've had the Breach section, which we've discussed already, so that's everything from Lex Proxima. What are my overall suggestions? Take Invading Force, take Seance, and take the Harvest sections. That's your 10 points. If, on the flip side, you're intending to do deep delving, then you're going to need to fit in all 6 of the Nico section, probably at the expense of all the Harvest side. And that's fine for you because harvest crafting is something you will just end up buying off other players, which is the most powerful way to engage with harvest anyway. Lex Ejoris is next, and Lex Ejoris is interesting. It's got a whole bunch of Delirium stuff, it's got some Incursion things, and some Metamorph and Parandus side of things. Let's start with the Parandus stuff first. Parandus is a mechanic that has been often regarded as a pretty weak mechanic. I don't think that's going to be the case in 3.13. So, Prospero's Promise gives you essentially a nerfed... it gives you a stacking but nerfed version of a rusted Parandus Scarab on every map. Now, the secret with this, and the reason that I think this is much better than people are giving it credit for, every area that you enter in Lex Ejoris has a Parandus chest in it. There is a Divination card that has a pretty low drop rate from Parandus content, but that does drop, and that is the Cheetah. The Cheetah Divination card is 1/3 of a level 6, 20 quality Awakened support gem. The Cheetah Divination card is quite expensive, and it drops exclusively from the Parandus Safe chest. That's the chest, the Parandus themed chest that drops a whole lot of skill gems. So, Prospero's Promise is going to give you a chance to find the Cheetah Divination card, and it's going to add that into every map that you run in Lex Ejoris. I don't think that this can be I think that this is much more significant than people give it credit for, and so I think Prospero's Promise is quite strong. Additionally, you can just stack this with Parandus Scarabs once Parandus Scarabs get cheap. Next up, we have Friend of the Family, which is big. Cadero Parandus offers the rarest of 5 chosen items. So this is essentially a 400% more multiplier to the number of headhunters you're going to get from Parandus, as well as a 400% more multiplier to the number of mirrors that you're going to get. This is really significant, and it's going to basically remove all of the absolute trash offers that you get. Now, this will mean that you will miss out on a few okay offers. Like, for instance, you'll get less Tabula Rasa offers when you've got this available. You'll get less Chaos Orb offers when you've got this allocated, but that's fine because you're going to be getting more of the high tier stuff. Additionally, Cadero Parandus' offers costing 20% less Parandus coins is a good thing too, because with you're basically going to be seeing the rarer offers 5 times as often, and as a result of this, I think that Parandus coins could be quite scarce in a trade league this time. All in all, I think that these two actually do make Parandus something that's going to be worth running a lot more, and I'm interested to see how it turns out. Next up, we have the Metamorphs, and we have Finest Samples, which is an incredibly deadly mod. Never, ever, ever, ever consider this if you're a hardcore player. Never. Like, this is one of the most dangerous things I've ever seen available to add to a map. Metamorphs in areas deal 50% more damage. So, have you ever been one-shot by a Metamorph? Have you ever sort of almost been one-shot by a Metamorph, but just managed to survive it? With Finest Samples, you wouldn't survive those ones either. I think this will roughly triple the number of times you get one-shot by a Metamorph, and Metamorphs are one of the things in the game that really do one-shot a lot. And they have a lot of mechanics that are difficult to learn, and also they frequently get access to a haste aura from their monsters, which makes from their pet monsters that spawn when they hit 75, 50, and 25% health. As a result, this is brutal. Also, Metamorphs in areas have 100% more life. Some of the hardest Metamorphs are the ones with life regeneration, and 100% more base life means that their life regen is going to be doubled. Also, they can get energy shield from their minions. That energy shield is going to be equal to 10% of their life, so this is going to be 100% more multiplier to the amount of energy shield you have to punch through as well. So for all of this extra difficulty, what do you get? 50% chance for Metamorph rewards in areas to be doubled. This is actually pretty meaningful, and I do think that you could consider this in softcore in conjunction with Metamorph Scarabs. So do keep that in mind as an option, but by default do not take Finest Samples unless you know exactly what you're doing and you are using a whole bunch of Metamorph Scarabs. I do think that this is something that you might consider speccing in and out of, and the reason you would spec in and out of this would be if you are planning on You stockpile a whole bunch of Metamorph Scarabs, then you come to Lex Ejoris, run all of your Lex Ejoris maps with a Metamorph Scarab, then unspec these nodes. That's another option too. And put them somewhere else that might give you some other benefit, like Pathological. Escaped Experiment is the next one. Now, this puts a rogue Metamorph into every zone that you run. I'm assuming that a rogue Metamorph is basically a Metamorph that has all of its parts allocated randomly. That is something that we don't really know how good the loot on those will be. I don't think it'll be terrible. I think it'll be okay, but again, this is super dangerous because Metamorphs are something where you often make choices as to which organs go in it based upon avoiding really deadly things. And you can't do that here. You're going to wind up with an escaped Metamorph that could do anything. So for that reason, take extreme care with this. Lastly, we don't know if it's the rogue Metamorph is based upon the parts that were available in the map. So the last thing you want to see is you're running through, say, a map like Dungeon, and suddenly you wind up encountering an escaped experiment that has the area control effect. So I think the area control effect is driven by the brain from memory. So if it has a Karj Ayalai's brain, that's the dangerous boss in Val Temple, then you're just going to end up being instantly killed by as soon as this escaped experiment comes close. So yeah, basically treat escaped experiments with a lot of respect. I don't suggest speccing into this unless you want to play around with it and have a bit of fun and probably end up getting killed by a bunch of Metamorphs you didn't see coming. But that can be fun and you will get some loot for it. Next up we have a number of Incursions. So time and again is one that causes you to get a lot more Elva missions. This is quite strong, especially in conjunction with Delirium from various sources. So there's a Delirium section in Lex Ejoris, and one of the northwest sections of the Atlas had some pretty juicy Delirium effects as well. I think it was Turns End from memory. Maybe it was Haywire Hamlet. One of those has some pretty juicy Delirium options too. So what you could conceivably do is come to Lex Ejoris, spec into time and again, run a lot of maps in Lex Ejoris, and just build up lots and lots and lots of Elva missions, and then use them in other areas of the Atlas. The additional Favour is a nice bonus if you've started playing the game recently. Favour is a currency that's used to buy hideout decorations. If you're into hideout decorations, you're probably going to want more of it than you can easily get in the current state of the game. It used to be much easier to amass Favour prior to the Betrayal expansion. So if you didn't play before Betrayal, that's actually a meaningful bonus. Time Dilation is an interesting one. This mostly makes incursions easier. Now that's nice. That's something that will certainly help allow you to think a little bit more in them. Additionally, Incursion Architects drop one additional rare incursion item. This is not that many. Incursion items are something that drop like absolute candy from Delirium content, from Breach content, and from Heist content. And so for that reason, I don't think this is particularly meaningful. However, there is an exception, and that is that sometimes there are some types of Atlas bases that can be worth a lot if they just have one specific incursion mod on them. And so it's going to depend upon what Atlas bases are available in Lex Ejoris, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the same as it was in 3.12 or not. And for that matter, I think from 3.12 you had Convoking ones, which I can't remember if there's any good incursion mods for those. You had... what else did you have? No, I think it was... yeah, Convoking ones and one other. It might have been one of the Steel Rings or something like that, were the two Atlas bases in the area. So reasonable stuff if you can get incursion mods on those. Okay, so next up we have Val Oligarchs, which we do not know what this is going to do. Incursions in areas contain an additional Val Flesh Merchant. We don't know what this is, so that's going to be a mystery. Now we get to the part that you probably care the most about, which is the Delirium stuff. Pathological, Compulsive Hoarder, and Persecutory Delusion. So firstly, Pathological is one of my personal favourite mods on the entire New Atlas system. Maps found in areas have a 10% chance to have layers of delirium. Now, we don't know whether this is one... well, it does say layers plural, but that could be an exclusive plural, so that they have 2 or more layers of delirium, or it could be an inclusive plural, where it just says 1 or more. It's not really clear from the exact wording that was used. I'm going to work under the assumption that it's going to be 1 most of the time, 2 frequently, 3 occasionally, 4 and 5 almost never. And that would be in line with my experience from opening heist chests that drop pre-Delirious maps. This is cool. Getting pre-Delirious maps is something that serves 2 main purposes. Firstly, it just gives you lower tier maps to play around with Delirium on, just for something a little bit different, a bit of a break in the routine. And secondly, it saves you from looking for Delirium mobs. Delirium mobs are pretty rare, and just having maps drop pre-Delirious is really good. I think that whatever you're planning to do in Lex Ejoris, your first 2 Atlas points should be spent on Pathological. And the reason for that is that Delirious maps will drop so much more loot, but specifically so many more maps, that it will really help you turbocharge your Atlas progression early in the league. So, whatever you're doing, take Pathological first, then respec out of it later if you don't want it. Then this is a prerequisite for Compulsive Hoarder. Delirium encounters in areas have a 15% chance to generate 3 additional reward types. Now, the way that I'm understanding this is that when this procs, which will not be often, if you're on a 20% Delirious map, you'll get the same loot that you would normally get in an 80% Delirious map. So you'll have 3 additional reward types. And if you have a Delirium mirror appear in your Atlas, a Delirium mirror appear in your map, then you will get, like when you finish it, let's say that you finish it with 5, 3, and 1, I think you'll get 5, 5, 5, 3, 1 instead of 5, 3, 1. We need to test that, but that sounds really, really strong. Really, really, really strong. And it's going to encourage people to play 20% Delirious maps, which is a new farming thing that hasn't really been done. People generally, with Delirium orbs, either go for 100% or for nothing, except sort of early in the league when your character's not powerful enough to do 100%. This is an interesting thing that's going to promote an in-between playstyle. Lastly, there's Persecutory Delusion. This is focused upon Delirium bosses. Now, there are 2 Delirium bosses. There's Omniphobia Fear Manifest, who is relatively easy to defeat, but can still do a lot of damage if you aren't familiar with Omniphobia's mechanics. And then there's Kosis the Revelation, who is brutal. Delirium encounters in areas are 100% more likely to spawn unique bosses, so you're going to see twice as many of them. This means that basically every map that has a Delirium orb applied to it from Lex Ejoris is going to have Delirium bosses in it. These Delirium bosses can take a little while to kill, but one thing that is good about them is that they're easy to escape. If you're outmatched, you can easily escape from them. And that's important with Kosis especially very early in the league. Delirium bosses in areas drop 100% increased Simulacrum splinters. This is not as significant as it sounds. The Delirium bosses just don't drop very many splinters. However, Delirium bosses in areas have a 100% increased chance to drop unique cluster jewels. This will be incredible early in the league when the hollow palm technique, I think it is, cluster jewel tends to be worth quite a lot of currency early on. And the Secrets of Suffering one can be as well too. So for that reason, I'm kind of keen to test Persecutory Delusion if and only if you can get to it within the first 3 or 4 days of the league. So, if it's league start, my suggestion to you is to consider taking Pathological first, Persecutory Delusion and Compulsive Hoarder second and third, and then afterwards maybe take the Parandus side of the tree with what you've got left. On the other side, if you get to maps a little bit later, then I'd probably actually go straight for the Kadiro Parandus stuff and Pathological first, and then fill out with either Incursion or Metamorph or more Delirium as you see fit. Anyways, that's all I've got on the Lex side of the tree. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one.